sir. My name is Chagun.
Fine.
I'm a policy advisor with PSA Professor Sood, and currently also taking care of communications activities for the office. And with me on this call, we have a communication specialist as well as the digital specialist, Nidhi, as well as Shakun. And this is a closed door conversation about the theme that is Industry Academia Partnership for Research and Innovation in India. And after editing, the same content will be also posted online. Now for our discussion, sir, we have secured, I think, 1 hour of yours. What we will do is divide this into 3 sections. And the first section would primarily about understanding the role and potential of industry academia partnership. And in the understanding, there are twofold that we would like to seek your insights on. One is within India, how do we understand this? And globally, how the industry academia partnership for research and innovation is. So in that front, a bare minimum understanding for our audience as well as for our team here is research and innovation as an ecosystem to thrive. There are a lot of instruments through which it thrives. How important industry academia partnership and collaboration as one of those instruments, in your opinion?
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for having me on this wonderful idea that you have, Vigyan Dhara. I love it because finally we'll have to reach out to the society, to our stakeholders, to the policymakers, the political system, and so on and so forth. So I think Vigyan Dhara will play a very great role. Secondly, as far as this entire topic of the industry academia interaction is concerned, I think that determines nations' competitiveness, to be honest. The most prosperous nations and most technologically advanced nations who actually have achieved innovation-led growth are the ones where India academic interaction is the strongest. The reasons are very simple. You talked about research and innovation. What does research do? Research converts money into knowledge. Government gives the money, we convert it into knowledge in terms of papers, in terms of patents, or what have you. But what does innovation do? Innovation converts knowledge into wealth. So research only converts money into knowledge, but innovation converts knowledge into money. Academia does the first. It is the industry which has to do the second. Then only the picture is complete. So around the world, you will find you put in money in research, it generates new knowledge, and industry does the innovation to convert that into money, pays taxes, and that gets back into research. So that's a virtuous circle. So the answer is obvious. Similarly, academia can have ideas, but in order to make an impact in the society or in the industry has to play a role. Thirdly, industry goes for excellence, and the academia goes for excellence, but industry goes for relevance. Relevance to their profits, relevance to their top line, relevance to their bottom line, relevance to the societal impact that they can make, competitiveness, and so on and so forth. So I think we have to realize that when we talk about economics of knowledge, all right, both generation, production, consumption, and conversion of knowledge is very important. So it is actually a cyclic process. How is India doing in terms of industry academia interaction? I was looking at the presentation that came up in the great meeting that PSA had called, and I find that US stands second, China stands sixth, and India stands 66. So we are way down. What does it mean? That means we have to go up. We have to do much better. The second point I'd like to make, this is a very important question, is that we always confuse by talking about scientific research and industrial research scientific research and applied scientific research, and so on and so forth. To my mind, there is no distinction. Let me explain from my personal experience. And during our interview, you will hear a lot of personal experiences, by the way, because I've gone through a lot. And I think nothing like learning from the book of one's own learning. Uh, I remember I came back to India in 1976. India was a poor country at that time. We were short of foreign exchange. And I was trained in non Newtonian fluid mechanics. And I wanted a Weisenberg rheogoniometer. For what? To do research in rheology. Can you believe it? It would take me 2 years to get it because digital clearance, not manufactured in India certificate, and so on. So I said, I'm not getting that equipment. What is the equipment God has given me? It is this. So I changed my field and I went into modeling and simulation, mathematical modeling and simulation. I started the work in 77, and within 5 years, it takes 5 years of minimum work in India to get a Bhatnagar Prize. So 77 I started, 82 I got SS Bhatnagar Prize. What was the mathematical modeling and simulation I did? I was consulting for an industry which was manufacturing polyester, polyethylene terephthalate to be precise. And I was a consultant for them. And I found that they had series of reactors, ester interchange, transesterification, pre-polymerization, polycondensation, and so on. And they had no idea about what was happening in those reactors because it was a licensed technology from Germany. So I said, I'll give you an insight about what's happening through mathematical modeling and simulation. The condition is that the new knowledge that will come will go into the PhD thesis of my student. Okay, we'll publish papers, but at the same time, the new knowledge that you will get will be used for your productivity, product quality improvement, and so on, creating economic benefit for you. They agree. What was the net result? Net result was K.R. Nath, my student, got his PhD based on that so-called scientific industrial research or whatever you want to call it. Industry benefited. Now, would you call it scientific research? If so, how did industry benefit it? Would you call it industrial research? Then how come my student got a PhD and I got a Bhatnagar Prize? So I think at the outset, I want to say that this is unnecessary confusion in India about creating borders between the two. We must remove that, actually. And the second point I'd like to make is that a lot of my own research has been inspired by what I've seen in industry, and that research has been so highly recognized. As you know, the highest honor that engineering scientists can get is Fellowship of Royal Society, FRS. We don't get Nobel Prize. In 365 years, there are only 3 engineering scientists in India who have won that. Ruddam Narasimha, who is no more, Professor Sharma, and myself. So this work, which actually came by inspiration from industry, was good enough to get FRS. You understand? So that does not mean that applied research is on the lower rank. It can be cutting edge. That's the second point. And the last point I want to make is that in my own experience, I have seen that lots of problems that I tried to solve, their origin was what I observed in industry. For example, some of the breakthrough research that we have done on what is called a stimuli responsive gel came out because of consulting assignment that I had in Boston, MIT, when we had gone for a sort of a discussion on borderlessness of chemical engineering science that MIT had held. And Dr. Ashish Lele, who is the current director of NCL, he created these lattice fluid hydrogen bonding models. That was the first breakthrough in terms of understanding why those gels behave in the way that they do. And that won us prize, like the word Academy of Science, Lenovo Science Prize, which is considered as a mini Nobel for. I think the point I want to emphasize is that partnering with industry, taking inspiration from industry, you can do cutting edge research, which can win international honors. And the last point of importance of this partnership can be seen by the fact that you are and I are able to talk to each other. It
Yeah.
is because of internet. And
Mm.
where did the original research on internet come from?
Mm.
It came from University of California, Los Angeles, University of California, Berkeley, SRI, and they partnered with BPN technology. Okay,
Mm.
but its origin, Gangotri, was in
Mm.
itself. Look at GPS first. You know, I'm a member of this Queen Elizabeth Prize of Engineering jury. It's like a Nobel Prize in Engineering. The very first one went to internet, by the way. Its origin was
Mm.
in academy and industry partnership. The second one went to GPS. GPS origin was Stanford University, and then Rockwell sort of partnered with them. Uh, Look at solar cells, for example. Calcium emitter rear cell technology, Martin Green, which got the award last year. You know, he had 120 PhDs, and they were the ones who became
Mm.
industrialists who sort of
Develop the technology
commercialized
for,
it in China.
yeah. Mm.
That is how the sort of we are where we are. Look at mRNA vaccine. Its origin was in University of Pennsylvania. It was partnership with BioNTech and Moderna, which made the difference. So I
Mm.
think long answer to your short question is that the change that we see in the world is
Yeah.
essentially because of the industry academia interaction.
Yeah. I think sir, you touched upon 2 points very precisely, which is we try to make an artificial compartment of academic research of knowledge creation versus industrial knowledge further production. So you shouldn't be seeing that as two different things. Both has to get inspired by each other to have as a holistic system to develop it further. I think that is a key message. Another message that you talked about,
That's the key. And then
how
the
basic, yeah,
second point is it is only science and its application. The
yes,
application can come immediately or application can come later.
yeah,
Like Raman, if was discovered in 30s, but
mm.
Raman scanner came several decades later, its application.
Application
All
came
right.
later. So
So
people trying to make artificial distinction of basic science to applied science and their applications to economic development is an artificial constraint in it. It shouldn't be seen that way. I think
completely.
very clear. Yeah. Thank you, sir. I think that covers already 2 parts of the first session we had. I mean, the segment. One important aspect we would also like to cover as part of the first segment is also your international experiences. You've been part of, you're currently also part of many international boards and committees and groups where you see how industry academia partnership is evolving from how it was traditionally seen, let's say the time of internet development to GPS development. Now it has evolved through multiple such models in UK, Germany, and other places, and in India as well. How do you see this evolution of industry academia partnerships, sir?
Well, I have been very fortunate to have had this global view in many different capacities. Let me talk about them first. For example, just as we have CSR India, we have CSR Australia, CSR South Africa, Fraunhofer Germany, VTT Finland, VTR Denmark, TNO Netherlands, Battelle US, CIRIM Malaysia. All right, these are all research technology organizations. And I was the president of this Global Research Alliance, which combined, sort of, which was a conglomerate of all this. So I had a view in terms of not only how CSR India works, but equivalent organizations in Australia and US and Africa and elsewhere work. The second is I was on the Microsoft External Research Advisory Board. All right, because we talk about industry academia partnerships, and that was the one which dealt with the industry academia partnership, by the way. National Research Foundation, run by Prime Minister of Singapore. I was on their board. I was on VTT Finland's board. I was France, for example, Michelin, their corporate innovation board, etc. So I've had a fair view of what is happening in the world. There are standard models that are working, but there are new trends that are coming up, and I will talk about the new trends. The first is that uh, we actually look at research hubs for shared objectives, where academia, industry comes in, and government actually focuses. And the advantage of that is rather than working in silos, there is pooling of resources, pooling of expertise, pooling of infrastructure, setting up the infrastructure, etc. And many times it is managed by the private sector because they can bring the best practices, but funded by the government or contributed to by the government. That's new ones that one has seen. Secondly, what I've seen is that there is always a competition between industry. Okay, but many times they come together to fund pre-competitive research. Like for example, I was a visiting professor at Delaware University. What I saw there was a high performance composite center because the basic processes that are involved, let's say in thermocuring and the rest of it, etc. There's a deep knowledge that is involved. So can you believe it? There were 7 to 8 competitors from Japan, from Korea, from US who came together to fund it. So what they would do is that pre-competitive research they will do, and the new knowledge that is generated, they will take back. Okay. And then depending upon the business that they were involved in, somebody would be in machinery, somebody would be in aerospace, somebody would be in something else, they would use it. So that is another model, but it is located in the university, and competitors come, cooperate, go back and compete. That's the second. The third is now with the digital media uh, becoming sort of prominent, people are using digital platforms. People are creating virtual labs where they can interact because previously, unless it was a physical lab, you could not actually do it. I'm very proud to say, I remember I was a member of the WHO Commission on Intellectual Property Rights, Innovation and Public Health in the year 2006. Madame Ruth Dreyfus was the former president of Switzerland, was the chairperson. I was the vice chair. And I remember in that we had posed a question, 2006, that is 18 years ago. Linux open source was coming up, okay? But that was for software. We said, why can't we do open source drug discovery? Okay? But that was just an idea. We did not know how to do it. But it was someone like Samir Brahmachari, who was the Director General of CSI, one of the brainiest guys that I've seen. He used Web 2.0 to create open source drug discovery. Now, normally, drug discovery will be done in the confines of multinational labs with scientists dedicated to that. So here, what he did was democratization of innovation. Can you believe it? He was able to get 130 countries together, 130, and close to 5,975 participants. And can you believe it? 40% of them were students. 40%. Can you imagine the students actually getting involved in drug discovery? That was made possible. And that was the power of the sort of digital. So I would say that has been sort of a big change. The other change that I have seen is that on the campuses of the universities and institutions themselves, you see the industrial research labs setting up their own labs. For example, EPSRC of UK, they had an expert committee, one in chemistry, one in material science, and I was a member of both. And I remember going to Cambridge, and we could see Microsoft Research Lab right there. I remember going to Cambridge while doing the chemistry evaluation. I passed one lab, the other lab was GSK, GlaxoSmithKline. The third lab was, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
they believe in technology and trust. Unlike us, we worry, oh, the industry will come and steal, etc. It was not that. It was based on trust, actually. So there is a kind of a homologation of
mm,
these in both the
mm.
physical world as well as the digital world.
Digital
That
world, yeah.
is more problem.
I think the three models that you talked about certainly are new insights for emulation, at least here. I'm sure here we do have some examples of that. So that's what brings me to the second segment, sir, about a unique nature that we see in India's research and innovation ecosystem. People talk about the trihelix. You have given keynotes around the world about the trihelix model being used in different instances, government, academia, and industry. But that industry part is component of many things. An academic part, uniquely in India, is a two-rail track is how people come in, which is there is a huge system of national R&D labs, CSIR, ICR, ICMR labs, and then there is higher education institutions, research universities where research also happens. So this parallel world, sometimes meeting with each other and not meeting with each other in collective academic R&D. How do you see this contributing to the overall industry academia engagements in India, sir?
Look, I have a borderless mind. I don't see any distinction anywhere. You understand? And therefore, what we have to see is that these are not actually parallel. You can meet those parallel lines meet. Uh, how do we do that? Let us look at CSR.
Hmm.
I was the Director General of CSR for 11 and a half years. Okay. From 1995 to 2006. Okay. Now we are a Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. So we used to do scientific research and we used to do industrial research. I said, let us drop the word and. It is Council of Scientific Industrial Research. Or in other words,
The way.
what we are saying is that the industrial research that we do has to be based on deep science that we create. So it is like people like to call it directed basic research or whatever other fancy word they use, but that was what it was. It was directed. You understand? That's number one. Number two was that if you look at the CSR transformation in 1990s, you will find that in Jan Narlikar's book called Scientific Age,
Hmm.
he has listed, according to him, the top 10 achievements of Indian science and technology. So
Hmm.
he starts Ramanujan and then goes on to
Raman,
S.N. Bose, and then Raman, Green Revolution, etc., etc. And the
Swaminathan,
10th
yeah.
one is now that CSI transformation was essentially because what we did was we made sure that people just did not do publish or perish, but they
Hmm.
went for patent, publish, prosper. In fact, CSR was the one who brought patenting culture in India, in National Chemical Laboratory. In 1989, when I took over, NCL had 0 US patents. And we said we'll become international chemical laboratory, we'll license our patents basically. And within 2 years, we were able to do that, licensing to somebody like General Electric, patents in
Hmm.
their own area. They had
Hmm.
40% share of polycarbonate. The same people who were doing copying, reverse engineering could do that. So I think it was kind of raising the bar,
Hmm.
partnering. Then there was no distinction. Oh my God, they are multinationals. How can we partner with them? That is another fear that we have. Oh, how can we do that, etc. We have to take out all those fears, basically.
Hmm.
Today, India is a global research and development hub. More than 1,500 companies are here, and a lot of
This
multinational
is
companies are
yeah.
one third, yeah, one third of their expertise. So when it comes to partnerships, we should not start having this distinction and fears, etc., etc. We gain because when we hold hand with the best, we have to run at their pace. No, otherwise we will crawl. And we learned ourselves so much by these partnerships. The important point was that in all this, we created programs where this artificial distinction between university, industry, CSI labs will all vanish. And this was the New Millennium Indian Technology Leadership Initiative that was created in year 2000. What did we do? We said, what are the grand challenges before India? Okay. And in different sectors, like for example, laptop was $2,000, too expensive. Can we do it for $100? Grand challenge.
Got it.
Tuberculosis gets cured in 2 to 8 months. Can we do it in 2 months? Because it is very important to make sure that we do it faster so that we don't have disease resistant, resistant TB, because people stop the treatment as soon as they start feeling slightly better. So we have to make it quick. It was not done. And we actually came out with the breakthrough of a completely new molecule, the first after 1963. Now, there, I'll just give an instance on how things work of these partnerships. You know, informatics was a big word at that time, in year 2000. I'm talking about 24 years ago. The best software, Acceleris, was $500,000, which our small biotech companies couldn't afford. So I remember going to Vidyasagar, who was the senior vice president of TCF. And I said, Vidyasagar, I'm the next guy. I want something 10 times better, 10 times cheaper. That is always my demand on my scientists. So I said, you have to create something which is 10 times better than Acceleris, but at 10 times lower cost. He was also crazy like me. He said, done. Why did I go to him? I went to him because they knew how to make a product. But the problem with them was that they had zero knowledge of biology because Tatas were not in biology at that time at all. So I lined up 19 laboratories, University of Pune, Center for Cellular Molecular Biology, and so on and so forth. Biotechnology, structure, yes, the functional genomics, and so on and so forth, etc. Now, these 19 laboratories and universities partnered with TCS, all right? And together they came out with BioSuit within 18 months. I had just put $5 million, which is nothing. And that was launched in San Francisco Bio conference that they had. Okay. Would Tata have been able to do it alone? No. Would these laboratories have been able to do it alone? No, because they did not know how to make product. Okay. So bringing it together made all the difference. Now here is the important part: talent, technology, and trust. When I went to my governing board, they said, "Hey, you are giving money to rich Tatas." I said, "No, I'm seducing them to get into bioinformatics." And they said, "Fine." When Vidyasagar went to his board, they said, "Hey, you're robbing poor CSR. We'll give you the money." He said, "No, I'm getting access to 19 laboratories knowledge base, which I would never be able to create myself. It was based on the trust." You understand? So therefore, we can create public-private partnerships without any distinction, everybody contributing. Here, University of Pune contributed as much as CCMB, CSR Lab contributed, as much as a private sector contributed. These are the kind of models we actually need to have.
Yeah, this is a eye-opening example, sir. If we may request this example of BioSit creation, is there any written documentation which we could refer to so that we can bring out more in detail?
Sorry, say it again. Yeah.
Is there any written document so that we could refer it further?
I will say absolutely no issue at all. These are classic case as a matter of fact.
Real case example which we can actually quote and then write the further part of it.
Yeah, but there is another thing about the Nimitri program which is equally important. What did Nimitri say? Nimitri said New Millennium Indian Technology Leadership Initiative. Leadership was in capital letters. Now, India has been a big follower, as you know, and we have been fast follower. Any new molecule comes anywhere, within 18 months, we can copy it. We are fast followers. But we don't create our own molecules and lead. Okay? So therefore, the basic idea was leadership. And when you have leadership, you are taking risk because you are doing something which nobody had done. In following, there is no risk. You are copying. Okay? So, our Honorable Prime Minister on 22nd February, our Science Day, He actually launched a ferry in Cochin shipyard, which
Mm,
was a proton exchange membrane hydrogen fuel cell, which
mm,
was indigenously developed, which is in terms of performance is better than the state of the art, and in cost
mm,
is almost half. Okay.
mm,
Now, where did it come from? It came from the public-private partnership of KPIT Technologies on one hand, National
mm,
Chemical Laboratory in Pune on the other hand, and there were two, three other CSR laboratories, including SICRI and NPL. It was a
mm,
public-private partnership. But the
mm,
beauty about this was the program started when nobody talked about fuel cells. Nobody talked about hydrogen. Now, green hydrogen, everybody talks about green hydrogen. Nowadays, unless you speak about green hydrogen or artificial intelligence, your lecture is not complete, right? Now, the problem was that Indian industry always worked where technologies were certain and markets were certain. Okay? Markets were certain because already they were established, and technologies were certain because you could always take them and copy them. We went into an area where technologies were uncertain and markets were uncertain. Like when we went to fuel cell in 2004, nobody talked about fuel cell. Nobody knew what technology is going to be there. There was no market for fuel cell. So when India wants to take leadership, you have to take risk. And the important part was that the government funded that risk. In a way, I remember our actually giving money to the private sector. In fact, in this case, the government gave money to the private sector, by the way. All right, because these were grand challenges that India had to meet with, and the conditions were so soft. I had proposed 0%, but it became 3% during the sort of cabinet meeting, which was fine. They said at least low number because at that time interest rate were very high, so 3% was very low. And to be returned only if you are successful. It was not venture capital; it was adventure capital. So when we talk about government's role, government can fund private sector in such sort of endeavors where without the participation of the private sector, we cannot succeed. Because and private sector is also putting not just its money, but its manpower. Like when I talked about bioinformatics, 80 of the best engineers of TCS were put in that. You can't put value on that, you know. So I think my view is that India has to have the aspiration of leading. We can lead. Our Honorable Prime Minister has given that sort of mandate to us. Because Bharat can't be created by copying other technologies. We have to lead in creating technologies.
I think the second example is also extraordinary. We would certainly benefit by looking at some more details. If you could also share that technology that was shared
We'll share.
between
Sure,
KPIT and
sure.
NCL
We'll
Pune.
share.
Yeah. So
Yes,
that
yes.
also uh, brings me to the point that you talked about how industry or a private sector led projects where they had the know-how of making products, and then 19 labs or 8 labs came together and universities partnered. So there must have been some form of a capacity and knowledge transfer that have took place, not just for that project, but for further in-house capacity
Absolutely.
in academic institution. Could you shed
You're
some light
absolutely
on
right.
how
Yeah.
that organically developed, sir, so that others could also gain insights on that?
I think it is like this. I'll give you an analogy. You have a piece of paper on which there are, let's say, needles. Okay, they're all disoriented. What you do is bring a magnet. What happens? They all align. That magnet is the big purpose where everybody starts aligning. Okay, like when John F. Kennedy said, "Man on the moon," the entire country got aligned. Like our Honorable Prime Minister is giving us those targets. We have to achieve this by that. That becomes the sort of magnet. So these are purpose driven. Okay, and then they get aligned, and then you can create those models. Like let me give you another model. For example, uh, again, Honorable Prime Minister has set number of targets in terms of our going carbon neutral, going green, going for green growth, and role of green hydrogen in that. Okay. Now in Pune, under the leadership of the Pune Knowledge Cluster, which is supported by PSA's office, by the way, we are grateful to him for that, and also Department of Science and Technology. Dr. Ashish Lele is spearheading a particular program on creating Pune Hydrogen Valley. Now, in that Pune Hydrogen Valley, what we are trying to do is that we can keep on talking about green hydrogen. But where will we use that green hydrogen? There has to be demand. So they have identified a demand in fine chemicals industry. Fine chemical industry is $180 billion. Okay. And India has barely 6-7% share of that. Can we double up that share? Can we triple up that share? Because the future fine chemical industry will have to use will have to produce green fine chemicals. Green fine chemicals means what? The reduction reaction that take place cannot be by gray hydrogen, but they have to be by green hydrogen. You get the point? Now, that has been identified in the Kurkumbe area. So that becomes a big magnet. This
A
project
purpose
that
for
we want
everyone
to
to
be the
align.
leader
Yeah. Mm.
green fine chemicals, that's one object. Then there are now, I think, latest number I don't realize, but I think that 12 to 14 industry partners are coming up. They are putting in 2/3 of the money, by the way. In India, normally it is the reverse. Private sector puts less and government puts more. And there are institutions that have come up, as a matter of fact. And this Hydrogen Valley project is not, Pune Hydrogen Valley project is not. So whenever it is purpose driven, okay, when the end goal is very clear, there is an alignment. When it is not clear, then there is a misalignment. That's the problem.
Very clear message. I think it's not only about institutional arrangement, it is also about the mindset and alignment of stakeholders. I think both has to go together.
Absolutely.
Where do you see our value system
Yeah.
in it, sir? And where do you see
Sorry, say
our
it
value
again.
system, overall value system of, let's say, the Indian
Yeah,
value system
I
of?
think in the overall value system, I think we must realize one thing, because I still remember when I started this issue of patent publish or prosper, there was a resistance because we do Saraswati Puja and we do Lakshmi Puja separately. The route from Saraswati to Lakshmi is not something that we understood. It is not the case as far as US is concerned. I remember I was chairing Reliance Innovation Council, and we had Nobel laureate John Marilyn, Nobel laureate Bob Grubbs. Then we had George Whiteside from Harvard. Okay, George Whiteside is the highest cited scientist in the world. His H index is close to 200, by the way. But he has companies with market cap of $30 billion. All right. H index 200 means Saraswati at its best, and market cap of $30 billion means Lakshmi at its best. The same individual. John Marilyn, the Nobel laureate, had his own companies. Bob Grubbs, the Nobel laureate, had his own companies. I think that is where the values come. You know, I mean, I remember patents, for example. I remember I fought the two battles. One was the turmeric patent, which was given for wound healing properties, and the second was basmati. And I used to joke by saying that 1898, when Sir J.C. Bose was the creator of wireless, but when Sister Nivedita went to him and said patent it, he said no, knowledge is free. Maybe he was right in his own values. But Marconi came much later, but Marconi patented it. So all of us in schools learned that Marconi developed wireless. That was not the case. So in 1898, it was J.C. Bose or Bose. To 1998, I fought Basmati. So it was a journey of 100 years from Bose to Basmati. because of our value system. We can't have that anymore. And therefore, if I used to talk so strongly about patterns, because patterns are what? I mean, you are talking about, when you talk about commercialization, when you talk about industry partnerships and so on and so forth, you are talking about knowledge, which is usable knowledge. And usable knowledge, in order to create value, you must have rights on it, like you have right on a house. Okay. And that awareness was not there. In fact, Frederico Mayer, I remember attending, this has been covered in my C.D. Deshmukh memorial lecture called Economics of Knowledge. I will send you a copy of that, where he has said that wisdom flows from east to west, but and knowledge from west to east. I remember correcting him, sir. I said knowledge flows from west to east is not quite correct. Usable knowledge does not flow. You understand? We don't get access to technologies, as you know,
Yeah,
even in
and
most
the
difficult
patent
areas.
treaties globally have been very restrictive. Yeah,
Very restricted. So therefore, when you create usable knowledge, which has the capacity of wealth creation, our own ideas here, because I've done search, as a matter of fact, some of the best ideas that are born here, wealth has been made in the US, not in India. That is where that entire change of culture is basically required. You talked about value system. Yes, we must value those who create values, not just publish papers, basically, our evaluation systems, for example. It is not just the number of papers that you publish or the citation. What value you have created. In fact, I'll send you a copy of my talk that I gave. This the first Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Memorial Oration.
lecture.
The title of it is Excellence, Balancing Excellence and Relevance. This is
Okay.
from right, and that is where I have covered many of them. I'll send you all that background.
On that note, sir, if we give a title to this featured article when we write it, can we title it
Yeah.
Balancing Excellence and Relevance?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Because the entire
Okay.
conversation has been on balancing excellence and relevance.
Exactly. This just occurred to me because all that as a connecting thread, what we see is how do you balance it? Without balancing it,
Yes.
without actually having a unified understanding of it, we are not going to create any value out of it, right? I think that's the key message that is emerging. We have the last
Absolutely.
15 minutes with us. So what we will do is take the time for you to advise us in terms of your ideas and suggestions. I have some specifics also where if we touch upon, I think it will be more valuable. One of the specifics is criticism of industry relevance is usually seen like a request that we pose to industry. But that's not the case, as we understand from your examples. It's a common purpose. How do we see that? And why do we always need to see as a collective endeavor, not as a demand that we always ask industry to invest more? Point number one.
Yeah.
And point number two, there are TRL levels, as you already touched upon, basics to advanced to translational research and product. How do we remove this artificial barrier in mind? Because these TRLs are just for notion of understanding, but not for creation of knowledge and innovation. So in industry academia partnership, how are these 2 points can be collectively addressed if we want to leverage it in India further and scale
Yes.
it up? Over to you, sir.
Yes. I think the government has a huge role to play in this, and I'm very happy. I had a long conversation with PSA when I visited Delhi recently on these issues, and of course, he had this wonderful meeting where he got the best of minds to talk about it. But I'll give you my view. I think the first is that there is a deep concern that has been expressed that the industry's share in terms of investment in R&D is low. In fact, during last 10 years, we have gone down from 0.7% to 0.64% in terms of overall investment,
GERD,
and we are
gross
less than
expenditure. Yeah.
uh, less than the world average. Okay, and we all start comparing with ourselves with others. But the major challenge is that the government share has remained approximately two-thirds, like in sort of other cases. It is industry share. Now, I can give you figures. For example, ours is 0.2% of GDP, no? China's in terms of industry share. Okay, whereas China is 7 times more, UK is 10 times more, US is 14 times more, and South Korea is 19 times more. Okay, so we have to propel our industry to spend more. What are the possible sort of vehicles? I think the first thing is that the experience, whether it is Japan, US, France, South Korea, Israel, everywhere, all those nations who are leading show that tax breaks have worked for them. India cannot be an exception. Okay. Not only that, in the paper that I've submitted to PSA, you please have a look at it. I have covered each of these countries and shown, you know, how that 1 rupee of loss of revenue to the government because of the breaks actually raised multiple times of that in terms of the private sector investment. You can see that. And I have given this, these are deep studies, by the way. Okay. Now, I remember when I took over as Director General of CSR, all these tax breaks had been stopped because somebody misused it. There were some air conditioners which were bought actually supposedly for the instrument lab, but were used in guest houses. And the then finance minister said, "Band karo isko," and band ho gaya. I remember talking to Dr. Manmohan Singh, you know, and said how important it is to get this back. And we started with 100% weighted tax deduction. Okay. We also put in accelerated depreciation allowance. We also included investment allowance. Okay. And then what we did was that to start with, we started it with only knowledge industries, so-called knowledge industries, because at that time IT and BT, if you remember, were becoming very fashionable. And later on, I argued and said that every industry is becoming knowledge industry, like auto industry. Today, if you see the car, it is nothing but a computer on four wheels, isn't it? Basically. So therefore, uh, gradually we raised it to 200%. Unfortunately, that 200% went down to 150 to 100, and now it is getting close. And the reasons I understand have been some misuse somewhere. But that does not mean you throw the baby out of with the bath water. What we have to do is to create systems by which the misuse is not done, and the penalties are severe if you are caught. Today, there are digital ways of tracking. You know, you can use AI, you can use blockchain, you can have a variety of means of how the money is flowing, as a matter of fact, where it is being used or whatever. So you don't do away simply because, and that is a must, I must emphasize, actually. If you are going to publish anything that I'm saying, please emphasize that. This is the most important point, as a matter, not because I brought it back, but because it is important for the country. Because Japan has done it, US has done it, Europe has done it, South Korea has done it, France has done it, Israel, they can't be all wrong. That's number one. Number two is incentivizing with uh, public procurement sort of this thing, I have full paper on that. I will send it to you in terms of the public procurement policies that we require. I'll tell you in our own small way. Maharashtra State Innovation Society, I am the co-chairman. The other co-chairman is the Minister of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, basically. And what we did was that the basic issue with startups is that they don't get funding when there are absolutely breakthrough ideas. So how do you sort of help that? Okay. So what we have done is that we have done away with the normal tendering processes, because normal tendering processes will ask you for years of experience. It is like Sachin Tendulkar scoring a century at the age of 15 in Ranji Trophy, but he can't get into test because he doesn't have 10-year experience. Startups by definition are startups. So we created a system by which there was certain parameters that were used as the so-called assured parameters from my book, actually, which have been used as a screening. You must be aware of that. And then they pass. I'll give you an example. For example, Sagar Defense was a startup. they had created these drones which can move on the surface of the water. They were given a work order without a tender, by the way, by following these criteria. Okay, for cleaning up Pune rivers, which become awful after Ganesh Chaturthi. And once that was there, he got other orders, and today he is one of the big suppliers to army in surveillance equipment. So that helped open the doors, but it was based on talent, technology, and trust. It was based on creating these sort of new models. So public procurement is an issue where which I'm very hung up on, because the rest of the world has benefited in a major way. I've given statistics also in my paper on how to do that. I will also send you another paper of mine, which is called Amplifying Spillovers, which has been written with two economists, basically, where we talk about the private sector role, how by contracting out, actually the other nations have benefited, and how we can actually benefit. And there are several other suggestions that I have made in my paper. You can look at them and put it. Okay.
Sounds good, sir. I don't think we can do any justice to the time that we have got in terms of the
No, I
of
know
insights that we are getting.
we have spent 1 hour and we have covered quite a bit of ground.
I know, and these recommended points, sir. I think tax deduction point that you had, to also acknowledge in the PM Stack meeting, almost every member resonated this point that the
Oh,
incentives
I
through
see. I did
weighted
not know
tax
that.
deduction, and this cannot be get away with, and this has to be there. And this was something I influenced by your paper
It
also,
has
because
to
that
be
was
there.
already shared with everyone. Yeah. And the second point about the assured parameters for startups to have a competing level playing field in public procurement policies.
Yeah,
And
I
I
will
think the
send you
Sagar
that
drones example.
assured framework. I'll tell you a bit about it. Actually, when Honorable Prime Minister created the Swachh Bharat mission, uh, there was a committee under my chairmanship uh, for drinking water and sanitation that was created to get the best technologies from around the world. Okay, and there actually I used, just 1 second. Uh, yeah. So this book of mine, have you seen this uh, book?
No, this is one of
Leapfrogging
the
to Pole
textbooks
Vault.
when I came to see, I read first, leapfrogging to pole wall thing, certainly.
Yeah. So therefore, when I was writing that book, what I was saying was that we can frog leaps because he's afraid of the predator and jumps a few feet. We should not do that. We should pole vault. The size of the pole is size of aspiration. And I remember I was chairman of Reliance Innovation Council, and that transpired between me and Mukesh Ambani, and that is how we created a new sort of leadership platform called Beyonders. Young people were thinking of capable of going beyond the realms of possibilities. And I remember the poll vault that Geo did. We are 156 among 231 nations in mobile data consumption, and came Geo, and we did not leapfrog from 156 to 150. We pole vaulted to number one, and that is where we are. Okay, and that book describes actually how we did that. There was a lot of innovation. Anyway, but then somebody asked me a question: when you pole vault, how do you make sure you don't break your back? That is where the chapter third is concerned. Assured. Assured is affordable, scalable, sustainable, user friendly, rapid, excellence in terms of technology, and distinctiveness, not me too. Okay. And this is a framework that we showed how, when firms have failed, they have failed because one or two parameters collapsed out of this. And therefore, and once assured, you have to be always assured. Today you may, and so on and so forth. So what has happened is that this framework is being used very widely now across India. It started with drinking water and sanitation for selecting the technology. They still use that framework, by the way. then it is being used by companies like TCS use it. It is used by national laboratories for screening projects. It is used by investors in terms of looking at technologies and whether it is well. It is used in several national awards and prizes now, and so on and so forth. So when there is this particular doubt about how do you make sure, how does a civil servant put his signature? All right, he has to be given a tool, no, that this sort of framework is what it passed, because otherwise there will be a knock on his door saying that it was your nephew's brother's somebody in 10 years time. So we protect him, and this framework is very rigorous, by the way. All right, in terms of it is semi-quantitative, not exactly quantitative, semi-quantitative. Some of it is quantitative, some of it is semi-quantitative. So
But
what we can
analytically
do
in
is
such a
that
way
in
to
our
ensure, yeah,
yeah, in our evaluation systems, basically, if we start promoting this kind of a framework, that please use it. And these are the normally you have to ask some dirty 30 questions, and you have to fulfill that. And what happens is that once assured is not always assured. So even in monitoring, because things change. All right. But just to give an example, for example, Napster, which was free download of music, had several million customers, but today it doesn't exist because in that assured framework, when it came to sustainability, the acceptance of society is one thing, and the Society of Musicians said you can't download my music free. Tuck, they went out. Okay, so when they started, they were on. Within few years, they were off. Similarly, you can see BlackBerry. It was a big hit, but if you looked at the assured parameters when they started later, they were still using that electronic keyboard when the touch technology came and the rest of it, etc. They did not keep up with this, and BlackBerry is no more. So we have analyzed several of these things. So what one can do is to integrate such frameworks in our policies, in our monitoring systems, in our evaluations, so that people have to fill it. Now, for example, if you want to submit something to drinking water sanitation, they ask you to fill each one of these, like affordability. Okay. Retrofitting, for example, will make it more affordable. You understand? Factors like that. Sustainability, for example, how do you deal with wash water and the rest of it, rejects or whatever. So you get into the details. So even the finance people feel more comfortable when they pass through such a matrix. Because India's problem is talent is there, technology is there, the trust is the big issue. Okay, and you can start creating trust once you put in frameworks like this. That's the issue.
I think the message is very clear, sir. Thank you so much for ending on that note, because we get that talent, technology, trust as a thread line. And then while we are ending,
Yes.
where we actually have weakness, right? Which is at the part of the trust on actually directly
Yeah.
funding private entities, believing them to start and lead
Yeah.
projects, and trust on individuals to
Yeah.
start operating on things. So the frameworks would be answer to it. Thank you so much. I won't take
Yeah.
any more
So
of your time, but
what I'm saying to the finance guys is that
hmm,
don't blindly trust. Verify and trust. And
hmm.
verification is through the assured framework. That's all that I'm saying.
The demonstrated instances to trust further.
Yeah.
Um,
So
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
It's a privilege
Thank
and pleasure, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now